Welcome to the American Indian Symposium, sponsored by Iowa State University. A series of events that will be scheduled through Saturday to celebrate the role of the Native American in our lives. I have the distinct pleasure tonight to introduce our guest speaker, who I think speaks to a most significant topic to all of us, and that is stereotypes of the Native American Indian. Our speaker tonight is Leonard Bruyere, who's an assistant professor of history at the University of South Dakota. In addition, he's director of the internationally renowned Institute of American Indian Studies at the University of South Dakota. His scholarly specialties include Indian white cultural and historical coalescence, peyote religion among indigenous peoples, sacred sites, and oral history, organization, and administration. We've also asked Mr. Bruyere to chair this week the external review team of Iowa State University's American Studies program. Not an easy task, but we're pleased that he was willing to do that, as well as participate in several of the events this week in the American Indian Symposium. So without further ado, I give you Mr. Bruyere.
Is this ring going to continue? Is anybody bothered by the? Yes. Okay. Could you fix that before we get started here, please? All those of you who are here for grades, would you please raise your hand? Okay. Not bad. That's still very good. I appreciate that. How about Curtis? Is Curtis in the audience? Curtis of the Mookie Bird and the Toucan Band? He'll be later. Okay. I talked to him last night after the wonderful show they gave us in the M Shop. Beautiful music. I'm still deaf. So you'll have to pardon me for that. I see we're still drifting in here. But I told Curtis some jokes last night. They did not fly, so I had to go into my repertoire, and I'll have to just come at you with some jokes that are untried. But I ask you just courteous, out of courtesy, laugh. They're Indian jokes, so if you need some help, I'll raise my hand. My right hand says laugh, okay? The other thing, I noticed that we do have some Indians in the audience. I want to thank you for coming, and we have some elders here, and I want you to excuse me if I make some mistakes, and you can chew me out later, preferably after everybody's gone. I'm also very thankful to the Iowa State University. I don't know where to start with the thanks. Generally, you start at the governor and work down the Board of Regents, the president, the chancellors, all of these people, the deans, assistant to the assistant dean, the assistants to the assistant's dean, and really it's the secretaries. They're the ones who run these colleges and universities. I want to thank them. But I also want to thank the most important person that we have as educators that we have, and those are the students. And without you, we could not continue with our honored tradition of passing on knowledge. So you are the most important thing. Now, along with being the most important thing, of course, is that you talk mom and dad into paying your tuition and fees. And don't blame us professors for all those debts you're going to have when you graduate. All right? That is part of the investment in your future. They're still coming in. I see Jerry still working back there. I want to also say some good words about the American Indian program here, studies program, AISP. when I first heard of Iowa State having a Indian Studies program, I laughed. I really did. I said, being aware of census and statistics and all these sorts of things, I said, there's no Indians in Iowa. So I called a few people, and I remembered a conversation that I'd had with Maria Pearson, a Ihanktonwa Dakota, who was a liaison to the governor's office and basically is a go-between between Indians and the governing process in South Dakota. And I found out that there are 20,000, at least 20,000 Indians in this state. So I'm mighty happy for that. And I know that, and later on I'll talk a little bit about how I think there's more. But when I looked at that, and I looked at the figures of the self-study that was done of the American Indian Studies program, it then occurred to me that there was a great interest in it, and they in fact did not have enough money allocated to pay for the instructors to give you those courses. And so over the last 2 days we've been looking at it, and we're very pleased with it. Like all courses that you take, there's always improvement, and that comes very slowly. So I'm proud of Iowa State University, even though I am from Oklahoma State. And I'll save my Aggie jokes for later. I was introduced one time by my friend who graduated from the University of Iowa. There is a place called the University of Iowa, I think. And he thought the best thing that I ever did at Oklahoma State was win the hog calling contest. So I'm an Aggie, and I'll get to that a little bit later. I think that really the most important thing that I work with and I see every day is the effect of television, films, and written words and how it fits this new real Indian. And really it boils down to a question of an image that you believe and I believe. Now, people around our world, globally, gain their images of the American Indian from many sources. Dances with Wolves. Is there anybody here that didn't see Dances with Wolves? We have. I saw a few hands. And the recently released Thunderheart, which I didn't see, incidentally. I've just haven't had the chance yet to see that, but I've read the reviews on it. Offer two examples that I want to work with. And they epitomizes vast power of films. And what I want to do is I want you in your mind to go back to Dances with Wolves because it is magnificent. It's a magnificent film in its scope. The sound effects, the use of the Lakota language, and generally a very positive portrayal of the Lakota in the mid-1850s. And within this time period, this 1850 time period, I think that I can say it's very nearly historically correct. Now, the camera work in Dances with Wolves, it does capture the breadth of the landscape, the depth and the distance and the horizons that you get when you're out in that great country in the Badlands and out in western South Dakota. And it also gives you a peek in how the environment and how the land affects a culture and its people. So essentially we are sabotaged, we are visually sabotaged into believing, for instance, a herd of 2,000 buffalo. 2,000 buffalo. They represented 20 million that survived at this particular period in history. We're sabotaged into believing that. Now, the sound work is magnificent. I went to Sioux City, and it had this nice large screen and speakers all over. And what it did is it allowed me to sit there and hear the rustle of the leaves. And I could hear the flies, and I could hear the stream flowing, and I could hear the sound of babies crying, and even the panting of a very playful wolf. I loved the sound. Great sound work. Perhaps to me the most significant thing was the dialogue that was done in Lakota language. And what that did is it affirmed the legitimacy of a language. And it dispelled the myth of a linguistic inarticulateness that we often attributed to American Indians. The other thing that I really loved was the portrayal of women in decision-making positions. And often you see us and hear about us Sioux people, I'll use the generic term Sioux, being portrayed as an all-male group of people, and the women are out there doing all the drudge work. In that movie, you see them making those decisions. The other thing that I felt that really gave me a sense of the power of this environment they lived in, and who amongst us tonight would mount our prized hunting horse, that horse that we have tied up in front of our teepee, and take a bow and arrow in hand and ride into the midst of these charging buffalo to get our tado, or our meat. That's a spooky, spooky thing. I was scared. And these are some of the powerful historical images that I retained from my one viewing of this movie. But I also came away from this movie, this 190 minute plus visual and sound feast, with some questions. I had some questions. There's empty seats. There's empty seats up here in front. For instance, was it necessary to portray the violence? Was the violence crucial to the success of the movie? I was offended. I was offended by that. And take it one step further. Why denigrate the enemy in a modern caricature of spiked-haired motorcycle gang? Was it crucial to the success of this movie? The other thing that bothered me was the taunting and that death-dealing frenzy of the one lone survivor that stood in the river and fought for his life. Because I know that in true life, this man, for his bravery, probably would have been adopted into that tribe. So dances reinforces in a negative but realistic way the political dynamic of our Indian ancestors. And I ask you, did the violence then negate the humane portrayal of the Lakota people? Because there was this use of all these beautiful things of these people, and then in the end, the use of violence, to me, had a negative effect on what I'd seen before. Break, drink water, Hollywood joke. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a cue. I have to ask for your forgiveness. I'm losing the most important thing I have. That's my voice. The other thing that was important about Dances with Wolves, of course, was they hired us Indians to portray Indians. Well, that's something different. But it created a problem. Okay, we always have problems, right? What it did is it took a whole bunch of people and convinced them that they were movie stars. So now you can't talk to your Tahanshis, your cousins anymore. You know, they're all made up and long hair and braids and stuff and have that stoic look. Take their glasses off first, you know. But as all things, it has positive effects too. Now, typically unemployment in South Dakota runs any place from 75 to 90%, depending on which statistic you want to listen to or read, which is very negative. But for South Dakota, it was very positive, because all these people that convinced themselves they were movie stars moved to California. So our unemployment statistic dropped down, which is great for us. For California, well, I don't know about California. Does anybody know about California? Now, the next movie I wanted to talk about is Thunderheart. Now, it also centers on violence, but its theme is a human being seeking his roots. And to me, this crystallizes my message that I want to somehow get across to you tonight. And I'm going to ask you right now, just take a little bit of time to look around you. Just take a look. Smile. Smile. Do it with a smile. Shake hands. Heck, we're all getting hot, tired, and everything here. Good. You saw your fellow human beings. You smiled and shook hands. Now ask yourself a question. Is she, he, she/he, or how about sure? Which might be a politically correct term. Is that person next to you an Indian? What physical characteristics guided you in your evaluation? Did you think dark skin, black hair? Did a feather headdress pop into your mind? But see, that's the point. We're guided by these images that we have in our minds. So when we look at people, we give them attributes that we pick up from these visual things that we see in the movies. And we pull those things out. I do it. I have a visual and sound and smell and memory storehouse that I use to look at people and see who they are and what they are. Now, to me, the FBI man's quest to find himself portrays a very human characteristic. It's a journey to return to a nurturing family. I don't know if it was genetic, if it's physical. I don't know what it was, but he went back and saw himself and saw his family and decided he was going to take the journey to find it. The other part of it is change. Change of a culture over time. And it's real hard for us sometimes to recognize change. I have long discussions often about the changes that I've gone through in my lifetime. But let's look at it as changing from a four-legged to a four-tired horse. I can't believe this. It says break, drink water. I'm going to tell you a revisionist joke, okay? And this is founded on research that I've read. And I think that Vine Deloria might call me a revisionist, or just plain crazy. But he turned me on to this thought. Now, often Indians were portrayed as living in these cold teepees and starving to death. But those of us with any modicum of intelligence that have done any reading we know that in 1850 there were at least 20 million buffalo roaming on the plains. That's a lot of buffalo, isn't it? What did it take to get that buffalo? In the movie, it portrayed them getting on a horse and going out and shooting it. What they were doing is getting a buff burger, where today we'd go down on our four-tired horse and get a Big Mac. Didn't forget. But I look at it this way. Okay, 1850, buffalo herd's kind of down. But if I take it back to 1800, the estimates are 50 million. That's a considerable size, right? Now, there's natural attrition in this buffalo herd. As they're moving along, one of them die of old age, one die of young age. Some bulls and cows die for doing too much of that thing, that other thing. Listen, 50 million buffalo walking along, one falls, dies. 40 million of his partners walk over him. You have tenderized buffalo. Now, what does it take then to get your food? A knife. That's all it takes. I don't believe it. I don't believe how hard it was to live in those days. I listen to my relatives. I go down on my land. I go down my allotment. Oh, incidentally, you're listening to an incompetent man. I go down my allotment and go up on the hills on that beautiful valley looking down the Missouri River. And in the springtime, probably in about another 3 to 5 weeks, I can go down there and I can harvest enough teamston or turnip to keep me for the rest of the year. And not only that, a month later I can get all the mint tea I want. I can go down to the river and get all the onions I want. People didn't starve in those days. They starved only as a result of this contact that comes in. But us Indians are as guilty of time lock as any other race. We fail to look at changes. And how do we measure this? How can we measure this? Well, for instance, when I was a boy growing up, I could, with a penny, I could go down to the store and pick up a Tootsie Roll. With a nickel, a Babe Ruth. And with a dime, a soda pop. That was pretty good. Now, what are these new generation's benchmark prices? For $1.15, you can get a gallon of gas. $5 for a movie, and 59 cents for a Babe Ruth. How do I measure it in my own lifetime? I can remember growing up, and one of the things we did to make money in our family was to haul water. And we would hook up Speedy Duke and Red to the wagon and go down to the river, back into it, and we had 2 big barrels under that, in the back of it, and we'd fill them up. And generally, I was with my Uncle Melvin, and I could tell how well my Uncle Melvin was doing on the economic scale, because when he was in flush times, he'd have a package of Pall Malls in his pocket. And when things were tough, he'd have Bull Durham. And when we pull out of that river, when it was Pall Mall time, he'd say, "Get, Duke and Red." And when it was tough times, he'd say, "Get moving, you son of a biscuits." So I could measure myself on these times and over changes. Now, arguably, and tonight I only want to talk about education. What changes were imposed on us by education? Boarding school. Anybody here go to boarding school? 1, 2. Geez, only Indians go to boarding school? Oh. Only Indians go to. My joke is no good. My joke is no good. I can't believe that. Let me put it this way. I've been in Washington, D.C., right, where we're sort of outnumbered. And I've talked to a lot of Washichus or non-Indians. And there's a lot of them, a lot of those poor Eastern folks are subjected to boarding school. Okay. And you know, in my talks with them, there wasn't a one of them that liked boarding school. Not a one of them ever said they liked boarding school. They hated being routed out of bed every morning at 6 o'clock, having to sweep the floors, make their bed, fall out for roll call, go down and eat a lousy breakfast, and then have to move to their classes. Nobody liked it. I haven't found any white guys that liked it either, or white girls for that matter. Boarding schools basically start for us Sioux Indians up in about 1879 when Captain Richard Pratt comes up the river. Unfortunately, he also had paddles. And he roped about 13 of us up and took us back to Hampton. Now, there's two arguments to this, and I'm not here to argue about that. We'll argue about that at 12 o'clock tonight. But I just want to take one little tack here on that. When I look at education, which meant relocation for us, which is really just a later model of removal. That's all it was. Now, in this relocation and this removal of us Sioux to the boarding schools back east, it started back east at Hampton and Carlisle, and then they started bringing it into the Midwest, in Ohio, into Oklahoma. What this did is it created a atmosphere of change, a big change. And when we look at it, my most important thing is the making of a new race of people. Mixed marriages and making new people. And in this sense, us Indians have always been excluded from what we've given to the gene pool of this United States of America. We've been excluded from that. We see in census, United States Census numbers this year, 1990, they have us at about 1.3 million Indians. And I'd be willing to gamble that there are at least 50 million Indians in this country. I bet a banana split on it. The other part of this equation really began 500 years ago today in the quincentenary. Because think about it, you history majors, and those of you that want it to be, all you wannabes. History is a great thing. You know, it's a hobby. I get paid to practice my hobby. I love it. 1492, Christopher Cucumber across the Mississippi. No. That's for the middle school. 1492, Christopher comes over and he takes Indians back to Europe. adds our gene pool to the European. A huge, huge influence. And this has been going on for 500 years. Now, I encourage my graduate students to look at that and say, go back to Europe and find our relatives. Because we have relatives over there. We've been going back. Besides that, in modern day terms, we have to go back and reaffirm that there really was a Geronimo. Oh. All the paratroopers, when they bail out, they holler, Geronimo. Sorry. That was one I didn't get by Curtis last night either. So what we do have a reverse Columbia exchange here. You can pick up Alfred Crosby's book and look at reverse Columbian exchange. I think it's very exciting, and I think it's something that scholars will start picking up on from all these things that are going on here. The fact that we should go back to Europe and find those Indians and find out how we added to the gene pool. Now I can tell my Aggie joke. No, it isn't time for the Aggie joke. My OSU experience. I can recall when I was teaching there, one class that I taught had 400 students in it. and sometimes I had those classes with hundreds. But when I would start my first day, and after I would complete my introduction and hand out syllabus and syllabi, and finish up and dismiss them, invariably I would have 5 to 10 students come down to the podium. And often they were blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and they would say, well, I'm Indian. And before I became aware of the fact that I might be showing disrespect to them by using this next thing that I'm going to tell you, what I used to say was, in my mind, I'd say, oh, yeah. And your great grandma was a Cherokee princess, wasn't she? And I used to tell him, well, I'm French. My great grandmother was a French princess. That's a dead one, too. What did come of this, taking off Indians into the urban environment, is really the beginnings of brain drain. Anybody familiar with brain drain? In South Dakota, 70% of our graduates get their degrees and go to work out of state. For us Indians, and in particular for us Yanktons, it started very early. And we can tell you of our relatives who left home during that time. And we can also tell you that they do come back to us. When they do come back to us, they're different people. They're different people. And that is precisely the point I want to make. This change. And changes in people. And when our relatives return to South Dakota, they're different. Oftentimes they're different color. They think in different ways. And then we have those other ones that come back that remember who they are. They come back and they'll participate, move right into the family, which means usually on the reservation is that pour a cup of coffee, sit around the table, and start talking about who you know, what you've done, and reaffirming all those things that tie you into that Teoshpa or that extended family. And often they'll participate in the ceremonies. We have a lot of Episcopalians. The Episcopalians came on the Yankton Reservation in 1869. Actually, they began infiltrating us when they moved the Santee across the river from us. And Mazzacute came across the Missouri River and brought the Episcopalian religion to us. John Williamson brought the Presbyterian religion on the reservation at the same time. And don't let the Episcopalians fool you, because we are also Catholics. We're just smart Catholics. Father DeSmit came through on a canoe in 1849 and saw all the savages gathered on the shores. And he didn't want to come into the heathen masses, so what he did is he took some holy water and he threw it at us and did this. So we're Catholics too. But we also kept our own religions too and our own spiritual practices. And oftentimes these people come back, will do that with us. They'll participate in sweat lodges and sun dances and these sorts of things. And we love it when they come back, because generally manpower is very short on reservations. So when they come back, you say, well, you know, I need to haul some wood. Or there's some rocks that have to be brought. And there's an arbor that we have to put up. And they generally will be very helpful. There's always food to cook. So we put them to work and they fit right back in on us. Of course, they also, some of them speak the language, still have it, and participate with us in everything we do. Shucks, they even participate in the 49s. Jerry, that joke didn't go over. I tried that one with Jerry and he laughed. We'll talk about 49s later. And oftentimes when these people come back, they can speak 2, 3 languages. Some of them can even talk to computers. Has anybody tried calling the IRS lately? If you want to talk to, press *34. If you want to talk to them, press all these things. And then at the end, if you get that far, it says, if you want to talk to a human, hang up. We're at coffee break. But the important thing, I think, is that we have these Indians today and amongst us here, these new real Indians, who tonight, right now, are participating possibly in a sweat lodge ceremony, possibly in a peyote ceremony, or a peyote meeting, or maybe doing their tobacco ties tonight, getting ready for the Sundance. And tomorrow morning, they will return to their job and could possibly be lecturing to 200 students, could be fixing the potholes in Ames, or hauling your mail. All of these wide and varied jobs that seldom do we recognize these people when they're in those uniforms that do not fit this stereotype of the headdress that we see in the movies. They're there and they're functioning. We have these other folks now that I think that are just fantastic, and it'll tell you how well we've adjusted. We even have lawyers now that argue in front of the Supreme Court. Great used car salesman. We participate in almost every occupation except one. One that I'm aware of, and I know very few Indians that do this. Plow jockeys. Anybody know what a plow jockey is? A farmer, right? Now, don't get mad at me, all right? Because I'm an Aggie too. I really am. Oklahoma State Cowboys. Well, shoot, I tell you, sometimes I even wake up in the morning and sing that old John Denver song, Think I'd Rather Be a Cowboy. But see, when you think about this whole idea of being farmers, it's nuts. It's absolutely ludicrous. Ludicrous. They want BIA. Anybody know what the BIA means, stands for? Bureau of Ignorant Affairs. Well, they want to make us farmers. All their life, from Thomas Jefferson, I admire that man. Thomas Jefferson didn't grow up in a log cabin. Thomas Jefferson had slaves. Thomas Jefferson was the most radical man in American history. Absolutely the most radical man. He thought that democracy should be fueled by the blood of revolutionaries. And he said there should be a revolution every 20 years. Don't hold one on me, okay? I'm just speaking tonight, and my fee is very low. But when I think of farming, immediately the first thing that pops into my mind is, boy, I drove down here and I saw at least 50 abandoned farms. So why in the heck should they make us be part of an industry that fails all the time? Fails all the time. But I think the most important thing, and I think really beyond education, the most important thing that ever happened to us Indians is when we got the horse. When we got the horse, it gave us a horizon that we could see forever. And that's what Dances with Wolves does. When you get up on a horse, you have freedom. You can get on your horse and you can ride and ride and ride and you can smell like a horse. I gave up on horses in 1984. I went through a divorce and she took all my horses. I can't afford those critters anymore. And anybody comes in my class smelling like a horse is out of there. But think of it. Think of the change. Think of the change that came over these people when they got a horse. This wonderful horse that they had tied up in front of their teepees and that they could use to get food and to go visiting on, to go down and pick up the mail. All of these things. And here comes the BIA, Bureau of Ignorant Affairs. What do they want the Indian to do? They want them to hook this magnificent animal up to a plow and walk behind it in that horse's doo-doo. What is that? I've just never been able to figure that one out. Is there any reason, does it make sense to you now why they always say, well, those Indians can't farm? I don't want to walk in horse, that stuff. But I am an Aggie, so please forgive me. What you see, these images that you see, should remind you that to accept the changes. When you see me, don't judge me on this blazer and this white shirt and this power tie and these shine shoes. Because you don't know me. I don't own a headdress. If I did, I'd give it away before it went into the museum. Don't lock yourself into a stereotype of us Indians. We're actually very funny people. Funny people. When I go home, I don't even like to go home. I mean, they have 10,000 jokes about small change, you know? And pretensions, forget your pretensions, because if you have pretensions to go back on a reservation, forget it. Nobody will even talk to you. But they will bring you back down and set you down there and bring you back into it. And you can forget all this blazer and stuff. Nobody had ever asked me if I talked to everybody down at ISU. They would know, well, no, we have some people. We have some Indians, Yankton Indians, that got a Doctors of Veterinary Medicine from Iowa State University, so we're aware of it. I think the most important thing to do is see each other as fellow human beings. And that's sort of simple, isn't it? It sounds very simple. In fact, it's so simple it's stupid. Because we locked ourselves into this stereotype. I'm happy to say that I don't see a whole bunch of people wearing baseball caps with a bill in the back. Because I have a stereotype of that too. And it isn't good. And if this was a